Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and today I'm going to answer a few questions by a viewer about growing strawberries. The questions were about, when to know when the strawberries are done. Strawberries have a finite lifespan. When to know when they're done, and what to do when they're done, how to deal with that, and how to go about planting the next crop. And so I thought I'd expand that into sort of a general, living with strawberries, planting strawberries, dealing with strawberries, managing strawberries, overall strawberry video, but also to speak very specifically to the questions of the viewer. So let's get started. Let me show you what I got here in the garden. So this is a bed of strawberries that I think is in its 4th or 5th year. I can't remember when I planted them. It's the early July, and there's the odd strawberry here, but they're done. These are June bearers. There's different varieties of strawberry, but these are all my strawberries are June bearers. There's June bearing strawberries, there's ever bearing strawberries, and there's day neutral strawberries. And they're all different in their own way. June bearing strawberries bear their strawberries in June. Ever bearing strawberries have a crop in June, and then a fall crop as well, September, October sort of thing. And day neutral, they have their heaviest crop is in the spring and the fall, just like ever bearing. But as long as it doesn't get too hot for too long, they actually keep bearing all summer long. I like June bearing because if you actually weigh total yield, according to research, I've never actually done this experiment myself, but if you read about it, the June bearing strawberries bear the most strawberries, the most weight. If you weigh all the strawberries, you're going to get the most weight. Even though they only bear in June, they put it a lot. The other reason is just there's like a 3-week period in June where I have to deal with strawberries. Get out of there. Squirrels love. Squirrel over there. Squirrels love. Come on, go. Get out of my strawberries. Go away. What are you doing? Go. Why aren't you afraid of me? Go. Damn squirrel. Anyway, what the heck was I talking about? Yeah, there's like a 3-month period where we're picking them every other day, and we're making jam and doing, eating strawberry dessert and all that sort of stuff, and then it's over. I don't have to think about strawberries for the rest of the year, right? When sometime in fall, when I can tell they're starting to suffer from the cold, I cover the whole thing with, everything lays down. Right now they're up because they're growing, they're gathering sun, they're gathering energy and sending that energy to the roots. To store up energy for next spring's crop. But at some point in the fall, they're going to start looking dead, start suffering, and I'll just cover the whole thing with a mulch. I'll talk about mulches a little later in the video, but that's all you really do. Okay, now these are in their 4th or 5th year. I had actually planned for this to be the last year of these strawberries, but they were extremely productive this year, so I'm going to give them another year. But what do I plan to do when these are done? Okay, when they're done, what I plan in that season, so when I have a season, a spring, where I can tell that the production has dropped, and that's usually in year 5 or 6 or something like this. It could be year 4 or 5, 6. They say strawberries have about a 5-year lifespan. So I expect year 5 or year 6, you see a drop off. They just don't produce as much. All right. When I see a season like that, that's the season where partway through the, after they're done producing, around now, right around the beginning of July for me, you plant something else. Now, what are your options for planting something else? Strawberries have extensive root systems, right? They're thick, heavy roots. So it would take a lot of work to prepare the soil to plant something else. You got to get the roots out of there, right? They're not only are they going to keep growing, but they're going to send out runners. Every year strawberries send out runners. It's like a thing that comes out of the plant, it touches down in the soil, and it makes a whole new plant. And you can let all of that happen, and your strawberries will just propagate and start growing strawberries everywhere. This strawberry here, growing between the rocks in the border, I didn't plant it there, right? That was a runner. That's probably the original stem from the runner. That was a runner that touched down right here and took root, right? So this plant is younger. It's probably a year old compared to, this was probably planted here last summer, okay? So this one's a relatively new strawberry, whereas the other ones are all old, right? And in here, I pull the runners off, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But you never get all of them, right? But most of the strawberry plants here, the reason they're so productive is because they're the mature plants, right? The crown, the base of the plant gets bigger and bigger and bigger every year. It's got more and more foliage every year, and every year the plant can gather more energy, which means the following year it can put out more fruit. So you want your entire bed to be, I mean, this is my opinion on the matter, you want your entire bed to be consistently the same age. So the plants are all at the same stage of maturity, which means you need to cut off your runners to keep them from making babies, right? So they're all the plant's energy is just put into getting bigger and bigger and bigger, okay? So for me, if you've done a good job of that and all the plants in your garden are of a consistent age, you want them to all age out at the same time, and at that point the garden's done. Okay, so what do you do when the garden's done? Well, you've got two options. You can plant something that season. Okay, so let's say it's July, early July, first week of July, and I've harvested all my strawberries that were harvested in June. And I've said, okay, this year was much worse than last year. There's less strawberries this year than last year. This is the last year. I'm going to plant something else. Well, you got two options because you got such heavy roots. You can till the entire bed, or you can meticulously go through the entire bed and pull everything out, pull all the roots out, get every single thing out, and then plant whatever you like. I mean, because it's July, you want to plant something that grows quickly and can handle being planted in the heat of the summer. So for me, that would be something like beans, right? Because smaller, like we tried to plant lettuce in the middle of summer, or kale, or you can plant anything you want. Okay, or if you've got some transplants that are looking for a home, you can plug them into that. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Till the entire thing really good, or meticulously pull every single thing that's growing in the ground, bang off all the soil, just recultivate the space and plant something else. Or you can do something really lazy, and it's not too late to do it at the beginning of July, which is to plant potatoes in the entire bed, where you're going to pull the plants that are growing next to the edges, right? Like this one here. Again, this is one that I wouldn't plant something underneath a rock like this, right? Everything in the middle you just leave alone. You're going to put potatoes, 1 foot apart in a grid along the entire bed. And then you're going to cover the entire bed with leaves or hay or whatever, and give it a good watering, and just leave it for the rest of the summer. And after a few weeks, the potatoes will start finding their way through those leaves, through that mulch, and by some point in late September, early October, you're going to choose a fast-growing potato variety for this sort of thing, but you're going to have potatoes. You can never have enough potatoes because they store so easily, and you can sort of eat them all year long. They store for a long time, and they're just so easy to deal with. These were planted around the end of April. You can see they're starting to yellow and they're ready to harvest. These are red New Orleans, I believe. But you can see there's a heavy mulch here, right? Just leaves and yard waste, basically. These ones here, I actually put the potatoes in about 6 inches deep in the soil and then put the mulch over top. This bed of potatoes was planted around the end of May. Same approach. See all this yard waste, quite deep, right? It's compressed, but this was almost like a foot high sort of thing, right? And that's all that I haven't watered, haven't done anything. These potatoes have come up. You can see I'm sure there's the odd weed in here, but there's very few weeds, right? They've grown really, really well, and they're doing great. So the only reason I brought up the whole potato thing is that's a way to have another crop in the same season of the year you decide to give up on a particular bed of strawberries. Okay, so you can till it, or just cultivate it by pulling all the weeds and all the strawberry plants, and just get everything out of there and plant something else, whatever you want, whatever you've got that you think will grow in time for fall. Or plant something like a potato. There's other options as well, but plant something like a potato where you can put them down. And I mean, even with these, I said you can lay the potatoes on the ground and put the mulch over them and they'll grow. But they'll grow even better if you just stick them in the ground, plug them into the ground anywhere. Even despite all the foliage and the different weeds and everything growing in here, you just, you know, drive a gardening spade into the ground, pull it over, and insert the potato, right? And then you put a mulch on that smothers everything out. And you let the mulch kill whatever's growing in the bed. And for some reason, the potatoes can find their way through the mulch and that sort of thing. Or you just cover the whole thing with cardboard, leaf bag, paper, news, you know, whatever you can find. You cover the whole thing with something that's organic in nature that you can just smother everything out with. And for me, that's the third option, where you just haven't got any other option. But it's better, right? Because you're using the heat of the summer. Everything grows when it's warm, right? So if you do that at the beginning of July, just smother the whole thing with cardboard or leaf bag paper or whatever you can find. Everything in that bed is going to die. It's all going to be dead by September, October. You know, that cardboard is going to be breaking down, so you put leaves or yard waste or whatever on top of the bed. And the following spring, that whole bed's going to be ready for planting whatever you want in there. It's going to be just completely rejuvenated. And no, I wouldn't replant strawberries in the same bed. I like to move things around, right? Plants the same thing in the same place year after year after year. It's very likely you're going to get a pest problem. So I would plant the strawberries. I mean, you can. There's all kinds of people online saying you can plant the same thing in the same place year after year forever. But, you know, it's fairly standard practice in agriculture to rotate crops. I think if you've had strawberries in one place for 5 years, it's probably not a bad idea to move them somewhere else. But wherever you move them, you want a place that's got a lot of sun. This bed here is right in the middle of my garden. You can see my garden's surrounded by trees, right? So the edges, generally speaking, that direction is south. The edges get less sun than the middle, right? So the strawberries are always somewhere in the middle. Okay, so I would plant them somewhere else. So let me show you just a few tips on doing all that. So here's a bed of strawberries I planted this spring. I planted 2. These are new strawberries, right? In the year you plant them, they're not going to do that much, right? The whole point of the plant is to just get big, okay? And the way I did this, because you have your strawberries spaced out, you got all this area in between them. And it's different. Not all mulches are not created equally. You want it mulch, but when you first plant the strawberries, they're very small. And if you put a mulch down, the birds will get into the garden. They kick the mulch around looking for worms and stuff, and the mulch will go on top of the strawberries. That weakens them, and then they tend to become taken out by pests and stuff. So I've found over time that for controlling weeds, it's better to just use paper. I did a whole video on how I did this technique, but these are just leaf bags. Just cut little holes in them and strategically place them over the strawberries. You can see the odd weed, because weeds are tenacious, the odd weed will still find its way through. You just pull them, right? Doesn't take much time. I might, you know, once every other week I spend about 2 minutes pulling weeds off of these things. That's all you really got to do, okay? And you just let them mature for that season, right? And the only thing besides pulling weeds that you have to do is that you don't have to do this all the time, but you have to look for runners. Look, so here's this, I don't know why, but this strawberry is just really grown well. There's a weed I don't want, so pull that guy. This strawberry's been very vigorous, but you can see it's putting out a runner. That's what this is, a runner. This is a new strawberry plant. So, you know, in one person's mentality, they'd say, that's more strawberries. I want more strawberries. No, you don't want more strawberries. You want plants properly spaced that are big and strong and thick and healthy, right? You're growing the crowns. So when you see these runners appear, you just snap them off at the base, right? You don't have to get rid of them. Just lay them on the soil. Just snap them off. You're telling the plant, no, you're not doing that. You're not making babies. I know you want to, but you're not, right? You are on your own. You get bigger, right? So here's another one over here, right? Look how long that one. So look, it's starting to form a new, this one's starting to form a whole new strawberry plant, right? If you really wanted to propagate strawberries, you could let that touch the ground. It'll send, this here little node will send out roots, and it'll make a whole new plant. But I don't want that. Just break them off. All right, so that's all you have to do. For the remainder of the summer, all I got to do, and these leaf bags, they hold up. These are double ply, and they'll hold up for a couple months before they really start to break down. So this is good for the summer. There's no fertilizer or anything in here, but whatever was in this soil had weeds and all kinds of things. I just covered it with the bags, right? I didn't really cultivate the soil too much. The areas where the plants went in, I de-weeded those little areas, but the rest of the bed I just let everything get smothered. So all of that stuff, all of that plant matter that was smothered out by the bags will break down, become a kind of compost, and feed the strawberries. And that's, I mean, you know, these aren't big plants. That's really all they need. I mean, you could fertilize, or you could do all kinds of things. That's up to you, but you really don't need to. This is fine for this year. Once we get around to fall, I'll cover this whole thing in leaves, right? Once I notice the plants laying down, right? Strawberries can take a light frost, but once you start getting into heavy frost and hard freezes, you know, getting to October and so on, you can just tell the plant's done growing. And that's when it's time to cover them. Just a quick talk about different mulches. I mean, there's all kinds of different things you can use as a mulch, and of course they're called strawberries, so in principle you'd think you should use straw. And straw is a fantastic mulch. Puts a lot of nutrients in the soil. Everything grows great in straw, but it's also full, whether it's straw or hay. I mean, people say hay has weed seeds and straw doesn't. Hay has more weed seeds than straw. But let's say a bale of hay has 10 million weed seeds, and a bale of straw has 100,000 weed seeds. And that's still 100,000 weed seeds. So it doesn't matter that it's less, right? And straw still has weed. It's not a perfect process how they separate the hay from the straw, right? The straw will always have weed seeds in it. And the fact that it has less, it doesn't matter if it has less, because in a bale of straw, less means like thousands of seeds. So you're still going to get weeds, all the same weeds, right? So I prefer using leaves, tree leaves. For one, I can't get straw for free, or it's very difficult. There's a stable down the road. Sometimes I can get hay from them, spoiled hay that their horses won't eat. But I can't reliably source spoiled hay. And that's the only place I can get it for free, and only if I'm nice to them. So generally speaking, you have to buy straw and hay, and it can be costly to source. Whereas every fall, and usually spring as well, people put cardboard bags of leaves at the end of their driveway, and you just take the leaves and use them as a mulch. You just make a huge pile somewhere on your property, and you've got those leaves for whatever you need them for, right? So this fall, this will all be covered in leaves. And I won't need these pieces of wood. This is just to hold the bag down. It gets quite windy here, so the point of those logs is to keep these bags from blowing away. That's it. All right, so that's what I'll do in the fall. I'll cover the whole thing with leaves. I'll actually put some of these things back on top of the leaves to hold them down and keep them from. I know whenever I talk about leaves, people say it's very windy where I live, I can't use leaves. Well, you know, this is Nova Scotia, Canada. We're a peninsula jutting out into the North Atlantic Ocean. We get tropical storms, we get hurricanes, we get it all here. It's very windy. And I'm just a few kilometers from the ocean on a high point, so it's a windy spot where I live. If you watch enough of my videos, I'm always apologizing for it being windy, poor sound quality and that sort of thing. But yeah, that's all you need to do for your new beds to get them started. So for me, it always makes sense to have a couple new beds, and it depends on how much strawberries you want. Right? We grow strawberries because we enjoy eating it in desserts, but primarily because we like to have at least a dozen 500 ml pint-sized jars of strawberry jam, freezer jam, set aside each year because we just love it so much. So I like to have about 3 beds at any one point in time. So usually 1 or 2 beds are old and 1 or 2 beds are new, and you're just running in a cycle. So these are brand new, right? Next year these will produce some strawberries. You can pick the strawberries. These plants have put out a couple little strawberries. You can see in that bed over there, and this one is the odd strawberry. You can pick those off. It's recommended. I never seem to get around to it, but it's probably a good idea. You don't want the plants putting energy into fruit production in their first year because they're not going to do much anyway. But next year these will start producing, And next year the bed over there will still produce, but probably not as much, I expect. Who knows? I thought it was going to die this year, and it was most productive year ever. We got a ridiculous amount of strawberries out of that bed. I mean, just every 2 days my kids would have to go out and pick strawberries, and they come back with a salad bowl filled to the top, right? So it was a really good year. I'll put the variety of, I think those are the Kent variety of strawberry, Kent, and I believe these are Sable, I think. Again, June bearing. So I hope I've answered all that person's questions and expanded enough to give any of you that are thinking about growing strawberries, or maybe have just started for the first time, some good advice on keeping strawberries. They're a relatively easy plant to grow. The main thing is keeping them weed free, especially when they're young, keeping them heavily mulched. Oh, the other thing too is you're going to mulch them heavily in the fall, and the following spring you're going to wonder, should I push the mulch back? That's always a question. Should I remove the mulch? No, they'll push up through it. They'll find their way up. I don't know how they do it. It always amazes me. You'll notice little mounds on the mulch, and you can push the little mounds aside, but the strawberries will have no problem finding their way up through leaves or hay the following spring. I don't know how they do it, but they do. So just mulch them and leave them mulched, and they'll figure it all out. But yeah, the main challenges are when they're young, when you first planted them, keeping the weeds under control, controlling the runners, keeping them from procreating, and then getting them mulched. And every season, when they're starting to emerge, trying to control weeds. There's all kinds of different weeds that can get into strawberries, and they can start growing into the crowns. You can get nervous because you've got like a clump of grass growing right in at the base of the roots of a strawberry. And you're like, oh, if I pull that grass, it's going to damage the crown of the strawberry. Doesn't matter. Hold the crown down with one hand and pull on the weeds with the other one. Get the weeds out of there. Right? Everything in that garden is competing for nutrients, water, and sun. And you want the strawberries to be the big winners and to get everything and to be big and fat and healthy and juicy. Right? So control your weeds, keep them mulched, control the runners, and every 5 or 6 years or so, let it die, plant something else there, and get something else going in another part of your garden for the new breed. And try different varieties. It's always good to experiment with different varieties. Anyway, pretty broad talk on strawberries. I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. And until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.